Welcome to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. This is our 144th episode on April 20th, 2023. My name's Andy Zee. I'm the host of the show, coming to you from Los Angeles, California.
And my name is Sunsara Taylor. I'm the co-host of the Revolution Nothing Less show.
We're living in deadly serious times. A time of enormous turmoil. A time of wars that hold the danger of becoming catastrophic nuclear war. A threat that weighs heavy for those with the courage to look at the world with clear eyes. A time of climate devastation with flood and drought, fire and storms destroying the earth so that it can no longer grow food. A time in this country when women have lost the constitutional right to abortion and thus the right to determine their own destinies and instead face a future of theocratic fascists in government controlling their most intimate lives. We're living in a time when LGBTQ people's very humanity is under incredible assault from government and fascist thugs.
Transgenderism must be eradicated.
We are living in a time when the police continue to run rampant, killing 3 people every day. This is a time when mass homelessness saturates cities that possess tremendous wealth. This is a time when refugees, perhaps 100 million a year, risk their lives on foot and in rubber rafts traversing the globe just to be able to live and survive, only to face refusal, face walls, and far worse, when they come to this, the wealthiest country in the world, their children have been taken from them and pressed into child slave labor, while the rest of their families are turned away and herded into horrific camps and detention centers, where their lives are at risk. And yes, this is Biden and the Democrats' work. This is not just the legacy of Trump. This is a time when the leading cause of death of our youth is being shot. Are you fucking kidding me? What kind of society creates this kind of world, and why? And how the hell would anyone who cares about humanity and justice bury their head in the sand or glued to their cell phone or up their ass and not stand up and say no? And more when they hear about that there is a way out of this madness, not jump to be a part of acting and fighting for a radically different and far better future. This is why on this show, the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, episode number 144, we begin today's program with this from the Call for International May Day, where we proclaim we refuse to accept this system's future. A better world without exploitation and oppression is possible. And we, the Revcoms, call on you to join us on Monday, May 1st, to send this message to the world and to serve notice. In these dark times, we are building a force to bring forward thousands and then millions into a movement for an actual revolution. And revolution means overthrowing this economic and political system of capitalism and imperialism. Why overthrow? Because it cannot be reformed. And there is a way forward, a way out of the criminal madness of the system. And this May 1st, we are putting revolution on the map.
That's right. We here at the Revolution Nothing Less show are proud to call ourselves followers of the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian, and we promote his leadership on this show. Bob Avakian became a revolutionary in the 1960s. He worked very closely with the leaders of the Black Panther Party in their early and most revolutionary days. He fought against the Vietnam War at that time and many other injustices. And in the decades since then, he has not only not settled in or made peace with this system, but he has deepened his impatience to see this system brought down through a real revolution. And he's deepened his outrage and intolerance with the way that the masses of people in this country and around the world are dogged by this system, precisely in the same measure that he has deepened humanity's understanding of how unnecessary all this exploitation and oppression is. The reality that we do not have to live this way, that a whole better world is possible through a real revolution. And he's developed the strategy to make this revolution, which you'll hear more about in the show today. And he's developed and wrestled with the contradictions and the problems that a new society will face when we build a new society after making a revolution. And he's concretized a constitution for how we'd go at building a new, radically different economy, a new society, a new government, a new education system, a whole new way that people will come together and relate to each other and to the planet itself and go to work to dig up all the oppression and injustice that people think they just have to accept.
So in speaking of all the outrages of this system and that open up the possibility for making revolution, once again, this was a packed week. Why don't we just run them down quickly before we get to the main segment of today's show?
Well, last week we covered this fascist judge out of Texas making an outrageous ruling that would ban mifepristone, a drug used in more than 50% of abortions in this country. And that is still being fought out in the courts right now. The Supreme Court has actually delayed deciding whether they're going to keep women's access to mifepristone in place while there are challenges being heard to this case, or whether they will restrict this necessary medication. So this is, as we covered last week, the biggest escalation in the attack on women's fundamental right to abortion since the right was overturned last year. And it is an indication of the juggernaut and the relentlessness of the assault that will continue until this fascist movement is defeated.
Yeah, that's right. It's very clear that they are not going to stop. Minority doesn't matter that these fascists they're going to go for it till they run the whole thing and run the table on the right to abortion. Also, earlier this past week, there was some incredible, really a horrific thing, but an incredible photo essay that I saw of the 39 bodies that were returned to Guatemala of refugees that I spoke of earlier who were locked in a detention center just on the other side of the border from El Paso, Texas. And it's come out that this was done by the people who were by guards and officials of that center. And this is just one of the horrors of this system that's made in the USA and carried out by countries under the boot of U.S. imperialism.
And then you have this young teenager, Ralph Yarl, who went to pick up his two young brothers, his twin brothers, one evening last Thursday, actually, and went to the wrong home. He's a young black teenager. He went to the home of an 84-year-old white man who, through his glass door, shot him, and then when he was down on the ground, shot him again. And so Ralph Yarl has survived, but that's just lucky. And it took days for the authorities to even make an arrest or press charges against this white man. It is just an ongoing indication of the reality that in this country, America, founded in slavery and genocide, Black lives still do not count under this system. It's one of the many reasons we need an actual revolution.
And this May Day, a big part of May Day is opposing the moves towards war. And just this last week, Finland, which borders Russia, was admitted into NATO and for the purposes of defense, but also potentially offense against Russia. And they're having discussions of how many troops that need to be on the border and all of this. At the same time, Belarus, which is another country that borders NATO, was announced by Russia that they are going to be storing and bringing nuclear weapons to Belarus. So you can see this situation in Europe in the context of the war in Ukraine has become even more dangerous. So on May 1st, we are raising these slogans in addition to "We refuse to accept this system's future. A better world without oppression and exploitation is possible" of this. No U.S.-NATO war with Russia. Stop U.S. threats against China. No World War III. All of this is very living in the news every day. We could spend the whole show on that, and I think maybe next week we'll do a little bit more on it. And the next slogan is, "It's this system, not humanity, that needs to become extinct." Now that can apply to the environment, but it does apply very much to this war danger between the U.S. and Russia, or the U.S. and China, or U.S. against both of them, and blocs are forming up. This is extremely serious, and Bob Avakian has said this is why, while it's always been terrible that these people have ruled this world, that it's now urgent that they be removed from doing so.
So in today's show, we have a number of really important segments. First, we're going to start out with Andy in conversation with Michelle Xai, who is a leader of the Revolution Club here in Los Angeles. And that will include, you guys will be talking about May 1st, Revolutionary Holiday, and our plans for that, how everybody should and can get involved in that. And that will include an excerpt from the interview that we did with Bob Avakian. Then we're going to hear from Rafael Kadaris, part of our team here at the RNL show. And he is going to be talking about the problem with check your privilege as part of the ongoing series we've been doing here called Woke Idiocy versus Real Revolution. And finally, we have a very moving segment put together by our team about Garrett Foster, who was a Black Lives Matter protester who was out in the streets for over 50 days in 2020 down in Texas with his partner and was shot and killed by a racist thug who was just convicted of murder. And the fascist governor of Texas, before the sentencing was even done, has promised to pardon this murderer. And so we have a segment that brings out the humanity and the heart of Garrett Foster and the danger of this move by Abbott.
All right, so let's go to that interview. It's always great to have Michelle here at the RNL studio. I'm here with Michelle Xai, leader of the Revolution Club in Los Angeles. How are you doing, Michelle?
Good.
All right, so we are just a week and a half out from May 1st, International May Day, and you and the Revolution Club have been going out among the people, different sections of the people, and I think it'd be important for you to tell our viewers some of what you've been learning about to help people see the importance of this, but even more, how to go out and really bring to people what this May 1st represents this year. We're going to get into it through a course of a conversation, but just right off the bat, let's share some of this experience that we've had.
Yeah, we've been getting out to different parts of the city with the call for May 1st. And I just want to share a recent experience getting out to the neighborhood in South Central Los Angeles where we, kind of came up on a scene where the LAPD had just body slammed a 14-year-old to the ground for littering, for throwing a carton of milk on the ground. They had 3 cop cars. They had 2 cops on top of her, had just body slammed her to the ground. They had a helicopter overhead and people were coming out and were outraged, righteously so, we're outraged.
Your outrage is right. Your outrage is right.
And people, and people from the neighborhood were coming out and somebody said to us, right, that they were sick and tired of this.
We talk mostly about the police around here because they always doing what you just seen. When they come up on us, they draw their guns out.
That they see this on a daily basis and that all they feel that they can do is just yell at these cops and cuss them out. But what we said to him, this is not all we could be doing, right? It's just yelling at the police and cussing them out. Because look, this is all coming from a system, right? A system that has a name, capitalism, imperialism. A system that needs these cops to be doing this on a daily basis, slamming people to the ground, murdering them, in cold blood in the street, harassing them. And this is on top of all of the horror and brutality that this system carries out, not just to Black and brown people, but at the border. 38, migrants dying in a fire, the ripping away of women's right to control their bodies, the destruction of the environment. This system is taking us to the brink of nuclear war. We refuse to accept this system's future. A better world without exploitation and oppression is possible. And we were bringing to them that on May 1st, we're going to get out there as a force, right? Representing for an actual revolution, because that is what we need to get this system's knee off of the necks of the masses of people here and all over the world.
I think that's an important message. I think what we want to do now, when we go out with this, one of the things that you had told me and other people have said that very often people say, okay, I hear you about revolution, but we could never make a revolution in this country because look how few people you are. You need a lot of people to do that. Even you say you've got to have thousands becoming millions. So Bob Avakian was on the RNL show, the Revolution Nothing Less show last fall, and I asked him that question. How do people say this to us? How would you answer that? So let's watch that and then we'll come back and talk some more. Some of the people who have been active going out to organize people with that understanding have raised to us that, but the people say to us, they look out there and they say, you people don't have that many people right now. You're kind of small. And not only that, there's not really the kind of mass resistance we need. And so how are you going to do that? Yeah, what you're talking about sounds good, but it ain't going to happen. What do you say to them?
Yeah, well, a lot of times it looks like something's not going to happen until the night before it does happen. That's one thing to that has meaning. It's not just a clever thing to say. This is a time of, when things are being accelerated at an increasing pace, and changes. I mean, who anticipated a year ago even that they would overturn Roe v. Wade? A lot of people are saying, the Supreme Court's bad, but they'll never do that. I've read many articles where people were writing and saying they'll never do that because most people in the country support the right to, at least the right to choose. Well, guess what? They did it. Things of that kind are going to continue to happen at an accelerated pace. And, so yes, it's true. The forces of revolution, in particular the Rebcoms who base themselves on the new communism, are very small at this time. That's a fact, and we're not gonna try to bullshit people and pretend something other than what it is, because we base ourselves on a scientific approach to making revolution, which means actually dealing with the actual reality and telling people the truth about the actual reality. I've told this story before. There was a group. I don't know if they're still around or not, but back in the 60s, there was this group called PL, Progressive Labor. I mean, you can imagine, they're supposedly a communist group. Imagine what kind of communism, what kind of group supposed to be communist calls itself Progressive Labor? I mean, come on. Anyway.
Wrong on 2 counts.
Leaving that aside, like in the economism to the nth degree, just like burying yourself in the narrow struggles, of today. But anyway, one of their members got up at a rally, and I think it was actually they were being interviewed too. And I think it actually got into the New York Times, where they said, "We have 10,000 members in Harlem." And a bunch of us said, "Man, what the fuck are you talking about? You don't have any fucking 10,000 members in Harlem." And the guy said, "Yeah, I know we don't, but if we say it, maybe we'll get them." Well, that's not the way we're going to approach things with that kind of opportunism. You have to deal with the actual reality. So yes, the forces of revolution are small. Right now, the Revcom forces, basing themselves on the scientific method and approach of the new communism, are small. And, if it were just a matter of like gradually accumulating forces, a few today and a few next week and a few next year, and, with the prospect that maybe in some, never land of 70 years from now, maybe we'd have enough people to make a revolution. Well, yes, then you could say that would never happen. But look, I made this point in 2020 when there was a massive upsurge around the murder of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. I said, look around you. Nobody expected this kind of massive outpouring. And yet, here it came seemingly out of nowhere. But it didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of the underlying contradictions. The oppression of black people in particular, and others, Latinos, Native Americans, and the brutal way in which this is daily enforced by murdering pigs. This was the underlying accumulation of contradictions and suffering and anguish and outrage finally burst forth when this was just one too many. It's similar to what's happening in Iran now. There have been many women dragged off the street by their morality police for years and decades. But finally, this one, with this particularly brutal murder of this, yes, that's what it was. The idea that this 22-year-old woman who was perfectly healthy had a heart attack is outrageous, and nobody believes it. Not even the people telling a lie believe it, I would imagine. Okay, but all of a sudden, things have reached another level. Now, I don't know where all this is going to go at this time. The forces of the ruling class there are still very powerful, but this has gone to a level beyond anything previously. And it's, on the one hand, you could say it's just one more thing. Here's one more woman dragged off by the morality police and brutalized, and it results in her death. But it was just one too many in the context of a lot of other things going on. People are suffering economically and so on. It was just one too many. The same thing in 2020. There were millions of people in the street. What was missing then, and we have to fault ourselves in part for this, although we talked about revolution and put out revolution, we didn't really go and struggle with people about, what this really shows is the need to get rid of the whole system. And you are not going to defund the police. Look at what's happened. You got, the great Democratic hero, Joe Biden. The answer is not to defund the police, it's to fund them, fund them, fund them. What'd I say? Fund them. But that was a prevailing line, and so this thing got led off into a side stream and a side street, and didn't go anywhere ultimately, even though it was really heroic outpouring of millions of people, which was supported by millions more around the world. Who predicted that a month before? I mean, yes, we've been talking for decades and mobilizing people in struggle against police murder for decades. There's a whole national day of protest against police brutality and criminalization of a generation and repression. That goes back to the mid-90s. But all of a sudden, a bunch of things came together. All right, if the revolutionaries had been working the way we should have been, bringing revolution to that and struggling with people, not just about we need revolution in the abstract, but why these other avenues and lines and roads and programs were not going to lead things where they need to go. The question is, why should anybody put up with this kind of brutal murder time after time after time after time? Why do the parents and loved ones of these people have to shed these tears and cry this anguish time after time after time? Isn't it long past time to put an end to this completely?
Yeah.
Okay, so then what is going to be required to put an end to this and all the other outrages, which we also need to be bringing sharply to light? The oppression of women, the absolute destruction of the environment, the threat of nuclear war going on, the persecution of the immigrants, and on and on and on. The persecution of gay people and, trans people and so on. In the context of all that, we needed to be saying to people, there's only one solution to this. It's not an easy solution, but it's the only real solution. That's what a scientific approach tells us, because this is rooted in the system and we can show it. And the only way to get rid of all this is to overthrow this system. Now, that probably would not have led to a revolution right then, but it could have led to accumulating many more forces. And then the next time something jumped off, like what happened with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, we'd be in a stronger position with more forces and more ability to impact that situation, so long as we were consistently going out there with revolution. And Lenin made the point, leader of the Russian Revolution and important communist theoretician, made the point that in these kind of circumstances, which we're living in now, and it's important to understand, decades of ordinary times get concentrated in not only in years, but in months and weeks. And that's what you saw in 2020 on a certain level, not yet to revolution, but that's what you saw. And that's what's going to be increasingly happening. The question is, are the revolutionaries, small as they are right now? Yes, we're going to be honest about this. We're not going to try to fool people. That's not scientific. That's not principled. But small as they are, can they go out and drive home to people this lesson and show it in a scientifically grounded, understandable way, not talking like, well, you must understand it's the imperialist system that causes all these horrors in the world. And the first thing we need is a proletarian revolution, which first occurred in 1917 after the failure of the Paris Commune in 1871, and was taken to its highest level by the Chinese Cultural Revolution. That's not what I'm talking about, okay? But to go out and in a living way present to people the actual reality of what this is all rooted in, why things are accelerating the way they are, how the ruling class is increasingly in an antagonistic, unresolvable conflict within itself, and how this provides opening for us to actually get rid of all this oppression by scientifically understanding that it's rooted in the very workings of this system, the very dynamics and the very relations of this system, and that we can mobilize and win over the forces, most of all people who are catching the worst hell under this system, which are millions and tens of millions, but also people from other parts of society who hate injustice and who want a better future for humanity and don't want to have nuclear weapons raining down on humanity, don't want the environment to be destroyed. We can win increasing numbers of them over, and it's going to all be very accelerated one way or the other. So we've got to go out with that understanding and give that understanding to the masses of people, like I said, in very basic terms and in everyday language, not in a stilted language that I was just, mocking, to be blunt. But, this is where building up the forces for revolution in a growing way Today there are small numbers. Tomorrow there are, hundreds verging on thousands. And there are thousands. And when there are thousands, those thousands make millions sit up and take notice. You see thousands of people all together, firmly convinced of the need for revolution, not in some sort of religious sense, but with a scientific foundation in basic terms. You see them on the political stage, influencing the political terrain, the how things are shaping up. Millions of people start taking notice. And millions of people who are telling us today, oh, that'll never happen, start thinking a little differently, or at least questioning, well, maybe it could happen. And then, the question is, do you have a leading force, a core leading this, that has the scientific method approach and has an actual strategy and plan for how to build up the forces for revolution, how to work to create the conditions for revolution, carry out what we call the three prepares. Prepare the ground, the political situation, prepare the masses of people, and prepare the vanguard leadership so that you can go all the way with revolution. And people are going to start sitting up and taking notice. Wow, there are people out here and they're very serious about this, and they have a scientific approach which they can explain to me in terms that I can actually understand. And they've got a strategy and a program for how to go about this and how to win when the time comes. Not that they've given us a guarantee, but they have a strategy for how to go about winning, and they've got a whole vision and concrete blueprint for what to do when we do win, namely the Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America.
So, Michelle, that was a really solid answer from Bob Avakian on a question that comes up all the time.
Yeah, I just want to encourage people in the revolution clubs to watch this together, to discuss it, and to show it to brand new people, because this is a question that we run into all the time.
Yeah, and May 1st is going to play a big role in going from being small to being bigger on the way to becoming still bigger again, as he described in that. He talked a lot about the importance of bringing to people in everyday, in common language, what is the problem we face, how are these different things relate to each other, the different struggles that you spoke of. And he spoke, too, of the importance of bringing to people that there is a way out of this madness of this system. And you were telling me that this is the fact that we have a way out has given people who've come forward around the club hope. In fact, some people have said the reason I'm sticking with this is because this gives me hope.
Yeah, look, people coming around the Revolution Club don't agree with everything, right? We're constantly getting into these questions. But one thing that we're learning a lot from a lot of new people coming forward is that they are attracted to the fact that there is a whole different way that the world can be. Somebody just straight up saying before meeting you guys, felt like we're all going to die anyways. This is all going to shit. There's nothing we could do about it. And then running into the message that actually we don't have to live this way and a whole different world is possible, right? That they keep coming back, even with all the disagreements, even with all their questions, they keep coming back because they actually want to know, how is that kind of world actually possible?
Yeah, this is no way for people to live. We had a slogan years ago that we still is really worth thinking about. This gives hope to the hopeless. But actually, Bob Avakian's written a whole paper that this provides hope on a scientific basis. This is something people can get deeper in. But right now, this question of there's a way out of this madness, and it's not you. People are being told to look into themselves to seek shelter from the storm, in the sense of self-care and all this stuff. We need people, there's no self-care when you're facing what we're facing right now. We need to actually change what's giving rise to all of this. But in terms of this pole of attraction, the pull towards something better, you also were telling me that there's people responding to the fact that we actually have a constitution for a new society, for a new real socialist republic in North America. It'd be important to share that with people and how important it is to bring that out to the people we're organizing for May 1st.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very concrete. It gives people a really concrete vision of what that society would look like, right? And you contrast that to the ways that people are, to everything you're describing, right? Living in a society where like people don't have to be like at each other's throats, where you don't have to constantly be like, competing with somebody that looks just like you, or fighting over a street corner, or, or just thinking that all you can do is just take care of those immediately around you. Like, because you would have a whole different economy, you would have a whole different system in society that is actually about meeting the needs of the people, right? And actually is about going to work on breaking all those chains. It's radically different, and just that kind of hope that it actually gives people.
So, Michelle, people are going to change a lot in the process of making a revolution, but still, after a revolution's won, not everybody's going to suddenly be angels and all, and there's going to also be all different kinds of things that have forms of oppression that haven't been overcome. Every man's not going to have overcome all his patriarchy, and there's still great differences among the people. But so how is this new society going to enable people to go to work on this?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's really exciting about the vision of that different society is that, for one, it's not a utopia, right? Where part of the difference in actually the problems in trying to rebuild that different society will be put on masses of people, right? And for somebody like myself who was told like, don't expect shit, or you can't understand anything or whatever, and seeing how in that kind of society, being part of actually working to change and to rebuild a whole different society is really exciting. And just a contrast, like, you look at when people have actually tried rising up against this, right? To the example that Bob Avakian speaks to, right? The gang truce, right? When people actually do rise up against police murder and brutality, and these people that we're told are monsters, are irredeemable monsters, right? These people that have actually tried so hard, right? And have done these gang truths, that the pigs come and just like, set them against each other, right?
And fuck with them.
Yeah, and fuck with them because of the very workings of this system, right? They actually can't resolve this, right? Think about it in a whole different society that, those people and those struggles will be backed up, right? Why? Because the goal of this society is the emancipation of all of humanity, right? We would be enabled through education, through being able to understand the world that we're living in, and actually, and the Constitution and what's laid out in there, right? What kind of society we would be fighting for, and going to work on coming together to do that.
Michelle, I think this is so important, and I can see why when you start opening up this conversation with people who are coming forward to May Day and coming to the Revolution Club, it's really the start of a whole process of really coming to recognize how through this, what Bob Avakian has put into this Constitution that he's authored and into a whole way of knowing and changing the world is really not only attractive, but it involves people grappling over all this stuff, and people who've not been, like you said yourself, not been told that's not your province, that's not something you can do. You just have to toe the line and accept our boot over on your neck. So I just think this is really what you said was very important. It's a beginning, and we're going to be doing more of that on the show. And people who come to May Day and come to the Revolution Club, this is what they're going to experience. People getting into these questions while we're standing up and organizing more people. So just go back to wrap this up. At the beginning, you made a point. I believe that this is going to be a chance for people. We're going to be gathering forces this May Day. And so I think it'd be important just to go back to what is a basic call for May 1st and why should you be there?
Well, look, on May 1st, we're going to be taking to the streets with these slogans. We refuse to accept this system's future. A better world without oppression and exploitation is possible. No U.S.-NATO war with Russia. Stop U.S. threats against China. No World War III. It's this system, not humanity, that needs to become extinct. Now is the time to get organized for a real revolution. And I think, look, there's so many people right now, like the brother that I was mentioning earlier from South Central, who has just been feeling like very angry around this, right? And think about all the people that feel that way. And on May 1st, bringing all those people together to manifest a force that is saying we are not going to accept the direction in which this system is taking humanity, and that there is a whole different way that the world can be. And we're going to go and we're going to impact many more people that feel that way to bring them into this revolution. That's the process of growing from hundreds to thousands to millions, for the time when we can go all out to bring this whole system down and implement and bring about a whole different society where things will be radically different, right? That's what we're doing on May 1st. And that's what you are going to be part of doing together with other people on May 1st who you've never met, who you would think are, or how in this society you're told you're supposed to be competing against or looking down on or seeing as your enemy. All of those people coming together around this revolution and putting in this society, when things are going in a really terrible direction, to wrench something positive out of all of that through an actual revolution.
All right, boom, that's it, Michelle. May 1st, come out, be part of this, get into the Revolution Club, write us, and watch the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show this week, next week, spread it around, and use it as a tool to organize people for May Day 2023. Michelle, thanks for being on the show again. This was great.
Yeah, really glad to be here.
Sunsara, is really good to be talking with Michelle, and she has a wealth of experience, a lot of interesting conversations and discussions and struggle in the Revolution Club in Los Angeles, and their work out in the field is enriching that, and people are getting into the big questions facing us. But the big question now I just want to highlight is you need to come to May 1st. So how do you find out where it is and what's happening in your city? You go to our website. If you're on your phone, you get to the table of contents. It'll link you down to, advance you to where there is a schedule. And the same thing on the website itself, on the upper right, it'll take you all the way down to where there'll be a May Day poster, and you click through to that, and it's the times and locations for May 1st actions and events. It'll tell you in what cities there's a march on May 1st, what cities there are stuff on the weekend, marches on the weekend. There are dinners planned. In some cities, it's on the weekend right before May 1st. And here in Los Angeles, it's this coming Sunday, April 23rd. There's a barbecue. So check that out at revcom.us and check our social media where it also gets posted. So Sunsara, one of these things involves you.
That's right. And we will be putting them on the screen too, so everybody can find them there. But the next segment we're going to is going to be Rafael on woke idiocy versus real revolution, which we've been covering here. But he and I and a team of RevComs are also taking this out in the world, which is very important. This is one of the big things holding back young people and people more broadly from thinking about the world the way they need to be and acting to actually change this world in the urgent way that's necessary and possible right now through a real revolution. So we're going to kick off our first in-person event as part of this, what will be a series of speaking events on campuses and near campuses on woke lunacy versus real revolution. Next Thursday night, April 27th. It'll be in the lead up to May 1st. I will be speaking at Berkeley Revolution Books.
All right.
Right next to the Cal campus there. Spread the word. Come out if you're in the area. And then stay tuned here in Los Angeles at UCLA. I'll be speaking on May 24th. Again, woke lunacy versus real revolution. And there'll be some other events that we post up as well.
All right. So let's go to Rafael Kadaris and your woke lunacy versus real revolution.
Thanks for showing your privilege, and fuck you.
Check your privilege edition.
Today we're going to be talking about male privilege.
Of course you have white privilege.
That is privilege.
Male privilege.
Privilege manifests in many ways.
Kindly check your privilege.
You have privilege.
The top 10 signs that you grew up privileged.
White privilege check.
Let's do another privilege check. Check your privilege.
4 points on privilege. 1, if you think the problem is privilege, I want to let you in on a little secret. Privilege is a symptom. The real problem is the system of capitalism imperialism. That system has a ruling class. They're the ones who really run this shit and enforce it with armies, police, courts, and prisons. Yes, of course, privilege exists. Wealthier people have it better than poor people. White people benefit from white supremacy. Men benefit from patriarchy. That's because these inequalities and oppressive social relations are built into the functioning of this system. And yes, all too many people cling to their privilege and enforce it in the most disgusting ways. But people with privilege are not the fundamental cause of this, and they're not the enemy just because they have privilege. If you think that, you're just looking at the surface and you're letting the real enemy off the hook. It is this system of capitalism imperialism which divides people up, pits them against each other in competition, forcing them to pursue their own narrow interests at the expense of others. A system which uses privileges like bribes to maintain people's allegiance and misdirect their anger towards oppressed groups rather than towards the rulers. To end these divisions and the privileges that go along with them, we need to end this system. And that means revolution to overthrow it and build up a whole new socialist system that works to overcome these inequalities, not by targeting and silencing people with privilege, but by dedicating resources and waging struggle to overcome all forms of oppression and forge a whole new culture based on genuine equality between different races, genders, and nationalities. 2. Here's a little clue that these woke identity politics hustlers who are always talking about privilege aren't really about radically changing the system, but just want to get their place in it. What's the one privilege that they never talk about? American privilege. You know, the privilege of living in a country that terrorizes and plunders the rest of the world. A country that sits atop the economic food chain with wealth and consumer goods flowing in from the super exploitation of billions working in sweatshops and mines around the world. These woke people want all they can get of that privilege. They just want more diverse faces and inclusion at the top of this system. A seat at the table. Or maybe a safe space within this empire while parasitically benefiting from the spoils of imperialism and turning a blind eye to the massive destruction of people and the environment that all this rests on. No. What we need, what humanity urgently needs, is a revolution to get rid of this system. Above all, right here in the belly of the beast. 3. Telling people to check your privilege is completely useless up against the real enemy. Just try telling these murderous police to check their privilege. You see, officer, as a white male in a position of authority, you should really leave that innocent black guy alone. See how well that works out. Or maybe the Iraqis and Afghans should have just told the commanders of the US military, you know, as white colonizers, you're occupying a lot of space right now and you should really take a step back and reflect on your privilege. All this is even more ridiculous in the face of a powerful fascist movement in this country that's determined to smash all this diversity and inclusion and basic rights for people and replace it with an openly white supremacist, patriarchal, Christian fascist America. I mean, do you think that the fascist judge in Texas that just banned abortion pills, condemning women to a Handmaid's Tale future, would give a fuck if you pointed out that he has white male cisgender privilege? Come on. It's time to get real. These fascists, the whole system that spawned them, and all its institutions of violent repression need to be defeated through a revolution of millions. All this woke identity politics shit is just playing around in a little sandbox, diverting people from the real struggle that's needed. 4. Telling people to check your privilege is not only worthless against the enemy, it's extremely harmful among the people. I mean, what's the point of it anyway? Once we're all aware of how much or how little privilege everyone has, then what?
Oppression Olympics. Let's go.
Compete over who's the most oppressed? Turning oppression into capital that you can leverage over others? Silencing and intimidating people who should be speaking out and standing up against injustice? Who benefits from this little game that you're playing? Not the masses of oppressed humanity, not the children in Yemen dying of cholera because of US-backed war crimes and economic sanctions, the Bangladeshi women stitching your clothes, not the millions of women in this country whose bodies have been hijacked by Christian fascist judges, or the masses of black and brown people locked up in America's hellhole prisons or gunned down by its murdering pigs. And you might also notice how identity can be a convenient excuse for those who have had a more privileged life to just stay in their lanes and not do shit. No, all of us have a responsibility to fight against oppression. As Avakian put it,
Instead of snarking and sniping at each other and being divided by identities, people should be working to unite everyone from every part of society who can be united in the fight against oppression and injustice, with the goal of putting an end to this system that is the source of this oppression and injustice.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott vows to pardon fascist killer of Black Lives Matter protester. In the summer of 2020, following the police murder of George Floyd, millions of people around this country from different races and backgrounds rose up to fight the plague of white supremacist police brutality and murder of black people. Throughout that summer, a white man named Garrett Foster joined protests in Austin, Texas, standing up for black lives in a state founded as a refuge for slaveholders. This was righteous. This was beautiful. In the middle of one of these protests, on July 25th, a fanatically racist rideshare driver and Army Sergeant Daniel Perry drove his car into the crowd. In the ensuing confrontation, he shot and killed Garrett Foster. In the weeks leading up to the murder, Perry had been sending Facebook messages about killing protesters. On May 31st, he wrote, "I might have to kill a few people on my way to work. They are rioting outside my apartment complex." Last week, on April 7th, a jury found Daniel Perry guilty of murder. But less than 24 hours after this guilty verdict was announced, the Christian fascist governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, announced his intention to pardon Perry. He did this despite the fact that he hadn't attended the trial or reviewed a transcript, which would wipe out the verdict the jury came to after seriously considering the facts and the law. In fact, he announced that he intends to pardon Perry before he had even been sentenced by the judge. Let's step back to look at what kind of person Garrett Foster was and what Greg Abbott and a whole fascist movement wants to eradicate by legitimating the wanton murder of this righteous man who was fighting for justice. Garrett Foster was 28 years old when he was murdered. Garrett was pushing his fiancée, Whitney Mitchell, in her wheelchair when he was killed.
Foster is from Plano, Mitchell is from Richardson.
They've been together since they were 17.
Which one?
And after going into septic shock at 19, she had to have her limbs amputated.
How am I gonna live my life?
Foster served in the Air Force before coming home to care for Mitchell, helping with everything from brushing her teeth to doing her hair and feeding her.
They loved each other on a level that I don't think most people are even capable of.
Love is why Foster was protesting Saturday.
Listen to part of this interview with Whitney and feel the tremendous loss at the hands of deadly fascist racism.
He was my best friend, and when I got sick, we had only been together for a year, and we were like only 18 years old, and he watched me go through so much during that time, and he stayed through all of it. He never left my side, and nothing changed. I always felt like a teenager with him until the time that he died.
Legitimating murder of protesters. Abbott cited Texas Stand Your Ground laws, which in the name of the right of self-defense are racist vigilante laws. Driving your car into protesters, inciting a confrontation, and then shooting down a protester is not self-defense. The beautiful rising of 2020 presented a political crisis of legitimacy for this whole system, which relies on police terror. It was especially a nightmare for the fascist movement that had risen to the highest levels of power with Donald Trump. Encouraged by Trump, fascists in and out of uniform unleashed extra-legal violence to crush these protests. Now this pig, Abbott, spurred on by fascists from all over the country, is eager to break long-standing rules of the system in order to override a jury verdict against a fascist shock trooper.
This man, a military veteran driving an Uber car, was convicted of murder. And what does that mean? It means that in the state of Texas, if you have the wrong politics, you're not allowed to defend yourself. So this is a legal atrocity. It's so obviously unjust that tonight we extended an invitation to the sitting governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, to come on this show on Monday. And we wanted to ask if he was considering a pardon for Daniel Perry.
A system that requires racist police violence, a revolution that is needed. For all their talk of justice, the Democratic Party contends with the fascists for control of a system that requires police violence and brutality in order to function. The Democrats rely on this police violence as a foundation of their rule just as much as the Republic fascists do, and they are every bit as pro-pig as them.
Law enforcement officers have a really hard, dangerous job, and they do it well, and they do it fairly, and they do it heroically. And we need to honor those folks, and we need to respect them.
And around the country, and I'm incredibly grateful that all these law enforcement officers are doing such outstanding work. We don't always get that opportunity to stand and applaud the men and women who keep us safe. But they're out there. Hundreds of thousands of them, patrolling our streets every single day. You embody America at its best and at its bravest, and you set an example. Because if top cops can risk their lives to do their jobs, the rest of us should just be able to summon some tiny fraction of courage and the same sense of responsibility.
Like Joe Biden says, their plan is to fund the police.
We should all agree the answer is not to defund the police, it's to fund the police. Fund them. Fund them.
The righteous rebellion of 2020, which Garrett Foster gave his life for, showed the potential power and the determination of the people when they do rise. But at the same time, so long as things remain within the confines of what this capitalist imperialist system will allow, the outrage of police murder will continue and even grow worse, as it has in the very years that followed this uprising. Most profoundly, the rebellion of 2020 shows the potential in the people and the need for revolution, a real revolution to truly emancipate the masses of Black people and bring an end to oppression everywhere. Neither the Republicans or the Democrats have answers that are in the interest of humanity, and leaving things to them is leading to a horrific, murderous future. A real revolution for a radically new and far better society is urgently needed. This revolution is even more possible now when both sides of the rulers are at each other's throats and the world as we know it is being torn asunder. Every week, there are new shocks and jolts, such as the murder of Garrett and fascist Texas Governor Abbott's threatened pardon. These jolts can lead people to question why things are the way they are, and if there is a way out. This rare time must not be squandered. People's sights must be lifted and their heads turned to revolution. Now is the time to give our all to that. As Bob Avakian says in his talk, something terrible or something truly emancipating.
Everything depends on bringing forward a revolutionary people from among the most bitterly oppressed and all parts of society, first in the thousands and then in the millions, as a powerful revolutionary force, organized from the start and consistently with a countrywide perspective, impacting all of society and changing the terms of how masses of people see things and how every institution has to respond. Everything must be focused now on actually bringing forward and organizing this revolutionary force.
All right, Sunsara, so we're at the end of this 144th episode. And before we close, I just want to say that to do what we're talking about, put revolution on the map, and especially this next week, getting ready for May 1st and making a big impact with that, we need to raise an awful lot of money. And there's a very important letter on revcom.us. It'll come up initially when you go to the website as a pop-up. It'll link you right to that. But this letter says, and I think this is, and I know this is consistent with what we've been talking about all evening here, that the world is being pulled apart. Night seems to be falling. But within that night, there is hope of a dawn in the way the system is being pulled apart from top to bottom, in the ways the rulers are at each other's throats, and in the way that all these shocks jolt people out of their apathy and despair. There is the potential for revolution. What gives that hope the possibility of being realized is this: there's a force that is preparing to seize on that potential and make an actual revolution. So go to the website and make a donation today. That'll enable us to print posters all around the country with this beautiful poster in 2 colors. And so we want to get this out, but this all requires funds. It requires you. And the other thing I wanted to bring up here is I was disappointed last week that very few people wrote comments under the show, and yet I heard from lots of people that they really liked our show last week. So look, these comments are very important because it gives us a window into what you're thinking, what impact we're making, or what we did that you didn't think was that good, that you didn't agree with, or you didn't understand. This is an essential part. We're not doing this just to become popular or just to mouth off or something. I know I'm going to knock the studio over, but we do this because we are trying to make an actual revolution that involves you. A revolution ultimately involves millions of people, but right now the scores and the hundreds and the thousands who watch this show need to be participating in it. So we appreciate the patrons we have, but all of you who watch the show, put a comment in here. And the more that there's contention and struggle and debate in that comment section, the more YouTube will push this up the algorithm. So you're actually playing an important role in popularizing the show. So those are the 2 things, Sunsara, that I wanted to add to today's program before we close out.
Well, that's great. The only thing I would add is use the letter, the fundraising letter, and send it to people that you know. It's a beautiful letter, and it's a chance to spread May 1st and this revolution and this show to others. So donate yourself and spread it. And with that, I will urge you to tune back in next week. We'll be back next Thursday at
There you
have
go.
to help me. You have to help me with the time zones.
5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time, and 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
You heard it from Andy Z.
And that takes a lot of science to come up with that. All right, good night.
We'll see you next week.